Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Sadly, my Spanish is nowhere near as good as my compatriot, Robert Rennick, so we will switch to English for this summary conversation between Alberto and I, which will try and pull together a little bit of what we've heard over the last couple of hours and summarize that for you in terms of where we might be on this journey towards a transition, and some of our takeaways, as well as what the Forum is doing about it. Alberto, you and I have now worked together for a couple of years within the Forum. Catherine Gislan-Laniel talked this morning about her optimism, about being on this journey, that we are on the journey, we're starting. Where do you think we are on that, from your point of view?
Well, thank you very much, Mark. And to start with, I need to say that I'm very happy to be here. This is my hometown, Yo soy de Madrid, and it's not usual at all to have a meeting here. So it's really nice to be here to have actually this very pertinent discussion. And I will also speak in English because I have to say, unfortunately, it is not normal at all for me to speak in Spanish when it comes to work things. So I'm not sure it will be that easy for me. Anyway, that said, so if I think about what we have discussed this morning, which, by the way, has been a very rich discussion and very interesting, and hearing everybody, I think that there is hope, because we are all rowing in the same direction. One of the key things that probably will add here, you have seen, I have been introduced as working for the International Union for Conservation of Nature. I have the impression that I am a rara avis in this place, so I'm probably, for some even, could be considered a bit like an opponent. Nothing farther from reality, actually. I think that we are all on the same game here. There is a future that needs sustainable agriculture and needs all of us. And this is not going to be easy. And this is about two societal priorities and actually societal needs. This is about healthy and affordable food. And it's also about an environment that allows us to live and allows actually that food to be produced. So yes, I am optimistic. We need to work together. The Forum for the Future Agriculture is actually a great example of how we can advance in that direction. And at the moment, yes, we don't have the how, but I think we can agree in many of the objectives. I think it was Catherine who was mentioning all the different targets that are included in the Green Deal. The Green Deal, as it was also mentioned before by several speakers, is a good step forward. It's something that we need. We need actually to start to think that the future is green or is not, as Mr. Janez Potocnik was saying before. Well, we have now the possibility to create this future, and we can do it together. So yes, I am optimistic, and I think that that's probably one of the key things. We are all rowing in the same direction. That's important and necessary.
I think we'll talk a little bit about that as we go on in our conversation, Alberto. The aims and objectives are clear, and I think from my point of view, I too share your optimism, but perhaps with one or two caveats. My optimism is grounded in the fact we're having the right conversations now together about aims and objectives. And you said yourself, IUCN and the Nature Conservancy being part of the forum, along with the European Landowners Organization, Syngenta, John Deere, PepsiCo, Nestle. I have to be careful, I can't remember them all at this moment. But all our partners, we're in the boat having the right discussions. I think I'd say from my point of view that we heard in the previous panel from Anna and Alfonso, there's great things that are happening, both in this country and across Europe. What I think I would say is that it's not extensive enough yet in terms of covering biodiversity, climate, soil health, productivity. We're not yet reaching the scale that we need to reach, and we're not yet systematic about the way that we're going about it. And I think some of the discussions that we're having on policy and regulation is polarized, because we pick on things that are easy to go after. Pedro talked a little bit about that this morning in his session, and yet we don't necessarily pay due attention to other areas. There's obviously a very tough discussion going on at the moment about nature restoration. But when you go beyond that, are we getting the financiers behind agriculture? Are we getting the right innovation that we need? Are we making the progress that we need on the science and the research, and looking at that systematically to bring it all together? So I share your optimism, but I also have some frustrations that we still have ground to cover that will enable us to get to where we're trying to get to.
And actually, I have to say that this said that I'm very optimistic, it is very frustrating to see the things, how slow they are. It has been mentioned, the discussion about the previous CAP processes, when there were some renewed reforms of the CAP. And now it seems that we are running. I wouldn't say we are running at all, actually. Within the past, I would say 3 or 4 at least, CAP reforms, there were some changes that were advancing a bit, but I wouldn't say that we are even closer to where we need to be. This is a transformation where we are talking about. It's a transition. It's a very challenging issue, I would say. I remember, I'm old enough, unfortunately, to remember when in the Spanish parliament people were smoking. That sounds nowadays like absolutely crazy. Well, we changed and nothing happened. We are here and the things are different. Well, probably with agriculture, something like that needs to happen. It's absolutely necessary. I insist, it's an activity that we need to keep and support farmers very much to ensure that this transition happens. But well, at the moment we are not in a line that goes in a right direction. So we need to change course a little bit. For that, there will be a need for a lot of support, that is for sure. But at the moment, I would say that I will share a little bit of the frustration you were mentioning about how slow the things are going. We have now good opportunities in front of us. We have now this call to action that we have recently signed as members of the Forum for Agriculture, different organizations with very different aims in principle, all going in the same direction. And now we have a statement that actually maybe is the time also to announce it in a way. We have a new statement that speaks about some more specific issues that we think that should happen and actually how we believe that the things will go in a specific direction. And this speaks about some of the actions, political actions that you were mentioning before, the Green Deal, the Nature Restoration Law, etc. We agree that there is a need to change on the aims of many of the objectives of the Green Deal. Now, how to make it happen probably is something that we still need to discuss, but at least we have a good starting point. And there we need to start to construct from there. So again, I come back to the optimist. Yes, we are in the right path.
I think that's right. I think for those of you that haven't had the chance to look at our website this morning, the partners came together to publish really an update statement from this conference, reaffirming what we believe in and why we want to work together. And as you say, it is about a restatement of the aims and objectives that sit behind the Green Deal and some of the legislation that sits underneath it. But also to borrow a little bit from Daniel Crespo when he talked about the need to make good laws. We need to make good laws, and for that we need the right dialogue and the right actors in the room. I pick up on the frustration of Pedro for sure. We have to have the right actors in the room in order to make good laws. And I think, again, whilst I shared, certainly the optimism that you and the rest of our partners have, Alberto, I worry a little bit that we've seen a bit more of a polarization over the last 6 months or so. And when I think back to why we set up the forum in the first place, it was to bring people together so that we could have that dialogue and find the way through.
Yes. Well, talking is fundamental. A dialogue is necessary, and actually this is what we are doing. But it's not enough.
Yeah.
And after a while of talking, there might be questions. Well, is it enough to continue this discussion? It's very nice to have very nice chats, but where are we going? And well, now to have this new statement, to have this new possibility to say, well, yes, we have been talking about now we really want to support some specific issues or files. That's something that is starting to be a change, if you want. The polarization is happening for many, many reasons, and actually it's not new. Unfortunately, it's there for a long time. I think that the future of the agricultural policy, which is probably one of the key issues that we all have in mind here, is going to be very different, and it's going to be also more, if you want, comprehensive in terms of including views from different people. When we say that some of us maybe might feel that we have not been involved in some of the key discussions that are happening in Europe for some files, it depends who you ask. Some other actors will tell you, well, we have not been involved in the CAP discussion enough because the CAP is the most important policy that affects the natural environment or any other issue. So yes, I don't envy our colleagues in the European Commission because that's a challenge. But yes, the dialogue and the discussion needs to continue, but we need also to start to do. And that's actually, as I said, I want to come back to the statement all the time because it's something that advances in the right direction. Now we are starting to have some kind of specific common, not only goals, but also aims in terms of changing things. That is helpful.
And I'm going to pick up on one element of the call to action, Alberto, and we've talked about it in the previous panel, regenerative agriculture. Many of us have been around a while, and we would know regenerative agriculture as conservation agriculture, and the practices that make it up are hardly new. What I always think about regenerative agriculture that is encouraging is that for the first time you've got major corporations making significant commitments to advance it. You've got people thinking about different types of machinery. You've got, as we heard in Brussels, Microsoft coming into the forum and talking about what technology, their kind of technology can unlock. I'm struck by what would have to be true in all different elements to scale and develop regenerative agriculture, not just the policy and the regulation or the financial incentives, but right down to what I think Anna talked about in the previous platform about rural broadband that would be needed for the connectivity in order to have the data to support it. It's a big task that is in front of us, but again, we're having the right conversation.
Yes, here, let me come back to what Ernesto was saying before. I like it very much. There are multiple ways of doing sustainable agriculture, and actually even sustainable intensification that sometimes can be considered sometimes a little bit, depends who you ask, not so well seen, let's say. There are many, and actually there is a terminology around it that is incredibly unhelpful, I would say. Conservation agriculture, agroecology, organic farming, sustainable intensification, as we were saying, carbon farming. It's incredibly complicated, and actually sometimes you have the impression that it's there not to help, but actually to make the things a little bit more complex. We try to help, actually. I'm not making any kind of publicity here of the organization, but we produced a publication about terminology related with sustainable agriculture a couple of years ago, and we try to help a little bit to navigate all this kind of difficult landscape. Well, it helps to make the discussion a little bit easier, so at least we don't focus on terminology, but we start to focus on what really matters, what we want to change. And in this context, yes, regenerative agriculture now is gaining momentum. Now nature-positive agriculture was mentioned before, I think, in the previous panel. There are many different ones. It is okay. The important thing probably at the very end is the practices that are attached to them. Intercropping, crop rotation, the hedges, many things that can be used and can be considered sustainable. And those are probably the things that are also easier to translate into policies, what needs to be supported. That might be the way forward.
Yeah, and the outcomes, of course, both the environmental and the social, as well as the economic, which all have to fit together in order to achieve true sustainability. I wonder, as we bring our kind of conversation more towards a close, what would be interesting in some of your takeaways from the session that we've had this morning and into this afternoon. I was struck by what Catherine, I think, was at least implicitly suggesting, that as we go into the next phase of the reform of the Common Agriculture Policy, almost to take the stand back and say, what kind of a food and agriculture system do we want in Europe? And indeed, Europe not being in isolation from the world, what kind of a system do we want? And then what would we need to put in place, yes, from a policy and a regulation and a funding, but also much more broader than that to make it happen. And that seems to me to be the intelligent place to start.
It was very interesting what our fantastic moderator was before saying about not having a clear answer from Catherine about the 3 points for the future CAP. As a journalist, I completely understand it. But as a policy actor, let's say, all of us, we should be happy. We have 3 years now to discuss and to shape that. Actually, the Commission is waiting for us for ideas. And actually, any idea that comes from a common forum, such as the Forum for Agriculture, will be difficult to ignore. So we are in a situation, I think, that is positive and very good for making that future green, as Janes was saying, that will be green or will not. And in that context, I think that it's also important that everybody here realizes that you will find environmental organizations. We are there to exactly do that future. So if we now have used this CAP coming, I would say 1 year, 1.5 years, considering the elections also, that there will be also some possibility to suggest to the new decision makers which is the line to follow. Well, if there are suggestions coming from forums such as this one, as I said, they will be difficult to ignore. We are in a positive situation right now.
So to conclude, Alberto, what message will you carry back to the folks in Brussels from today's meeting?
I always come to the same in terms of working together. As I said, I'm a little bit of a rara avis in this environment. I'm the environmental one, actually. But I don't have the impression that we are that far away. Yeah, we don't agree in many things, probably not exactly in some of the house. But we do agree that there is a need for a transition, and we do agree that we need to do that, to make that happen, especially through support. And the future CAP is in front of us, actually, to make that happen. So if you want the main issue that I will find, again, to discuss when we go back to our daily lives in the Brussels bubble, is to ensure that also decision makers are aware that we are trying to get this transformation and these messages together, all of us, which is very helpful.
I think I would echo that as well, Alberto. I think the diversity and the richness of the discussion that we've had here today, also some of the candid interventions, not just from people like Pedro, but I think all our speakers, we're aligned, I think, as you say, on the aims and objectives and the need to drive the transition. Even if there's a difference of opinion sometimes in how we get there, there is an energy and drive to be able to do that. And I think meetings like this and groups like this with these kind of people, I think are powerful organisms, which I hope that the policymakers and indeed industry, financiers, and the NGO community will draw on as we take on some of these challenges that are in front of us. So, as always, Alberto, I look forward to working with you, and on behalf of the Forum and our chairman, Janusz Potocznik, I want to thank all of you for joining us today and making such a rich contribution. And so my timer tells us that we are out of time, and so we shall hand back to our esteemed moderator, Elisa. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Mark and Alberto. So we're going to close this forum. Thank you to the partners and sponsors that made possible this forum hosted in Spain. Thank you to all the people working in production, technicians, and who started this morning. I started reading Columella, who was a Roman person that did a treaty in the 18th century. So I would like to finish with him, because in chapter 1 of Res Rustica, Things of the Countryside, he said, whatever are the issues of nowadays agriculture and the one from the past, do not deny the nowadays farmer from reading from the past, because there are many things there from being applied than not. So far and so near. So thanks to all of you for sharing your time this morning with us, and we look forward to see you in the next Forum for the Future of Agriculture. Thank you.